Qui-Gon Jinn's death in Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace might seem like just another tragic loss in the Star Wars saga, but it was in fact a pivotal turning point for the entire story. The ripple effect of Qui-Gon's absence shaped Anakin Skywalker's destiny and set him on a path toward the dark side. In simple terms, losing Qui-Gon meant Anakin lost the one person who could have been the guiding father figure he desperately needed. This loss had profound consequences, ultimately making Qui-Gon's death a much bigger deal than many fans realize, especially in how it contributed to Anakin's fall to Darth Vader. Let's break down exactly why Qui-Gon's demise was so crucial. Anakin Skywalker grew up without a father. He was a child of prophecy with a miraculous birth, and his only family on Tatooine was his mother, Shmi. When Qui-Gon Jinn arrived and discovered Anakin, it was the first time a strong adult male figure believed in Anakin's potential. For a young boy who had only known slavery and a hard life, Qui-Gon's faith must have meant the world. In that short time during the Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon became a sort of father figure to Anakin, something the boy had never experienced before. Qui-Gon was kind, encouraging, and treated Anakin with respect. He freed Anakin from slavery and wanted to give him a better future by training him as a Jedi. All of this created a deep attachment in Anakin's heart. He looked up to Qui-Gon with gratitude and even love, the way a child would to a parent. Unfortunately, losing Qui-Gon so soon after gaining his trust tore apart Anakin's heart. Imagine being a 9-year-old boy who finally meets someone you see as a father, only to have that person taken away violently. It's more than just a sad moment, it's a trauma that shaped Anakin's emotional state. In Anakin's eyes, his father figure abandoned him, even though we know Qui-Gon didn't choose to die. From Anakin's perspective, the result is the same. He's suddenly gone. This kind of loss planted seeds of fear in Anakin, fear of losing those he loves. We all know Yoda's famous warning: fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. And indeed, Anakin's fear of loss becomes a key factor in his eventual turn to the dark side. Beyond being a father figure, Qui-Gon Jinn was unique among the Jedi. He believed completely in the prophecy of the Chosen One, who would bring balance to the Force. From the moment he met Anakin, Qui-Gon was convinced that this boy was that Chosen One. The rest of the Jedi Council was skeptical. They found Anakin to be too old to begin training and sensed fear in him. In fact, the High Council initially refused to let Qui-Gon train Anakin at all. It was only after Qui-Gon's death that the Council, out of respect for the dying wish of a great Jedi Master, relented and allowed Anakin to be trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Master Yoda himself was the lone dissenter, reluctantly going along with training Anakin but warning that he sensed danger in the boy's future. This reluctance meant that Anakin entered the Jedi Order under unusual and emotionally fraught circumstances. Qui-Gon's death thus had an immediate practical effect. It forced the Jedi Council's hand. If Qui-Gon had lived, there was a chance he would have continued to challenge the Council's decisions, as he often did, or even train Anakin on his own terms. Qui-Gon was known for following the will of the Force over the strict rules of the Jedi Council. He even told the Council point blank that he would take Anakin as his Padawan, despite their objections. In short, Qui-Gon was the one Jedi willing to defy tradition for Anakin's sake. When he died, that maverick advocate for Anakin was lost. Anakin was accepted into the Jedi Order, yes, but now without Qui-Gon's protection or his forward-thinking philosophy. This meant Anakin had to grow under the full dogma of the Jedi Temple, an institution that, while well-meaning, did not truly understand how to handle someone like him. It's worth noting that Qui-Gon understood Anakin's emotional needs better than most. He knew taking Anakin from his mother was risky and compassionate at the same time. In fact, during the journey to Coruscant, Qui-Gon showed a gentle, guiding side. For example, teaching Anakin about the Force and calming his worries. Qui-Gon followed the living Force, focusing on the moment and empathy, which might have helped Anakin cope with fear and attachments in a healthier way. Losing Qui-Gon meant losing his specialized guidance. No other Jedi Master at the time quite shared Qui-Gon's perspective, or his balance of compassion and discipline. The lightsaber duel where Qui-Gon fell isn't titled Duel of the Fates for nothing. That duel was fundamentally about the fate of Anakin Skywalker. Qui-Gon was fighting Darth Maul not just to survive, but to protect Anakin's future. If Qui-Gon had won, he would have gone on to train Anakin and be the father figure Anakin needed. Because Qui-Gon lost and died, that father figure was gone, and Anakin's life took a dramatically different path. Qui-Gon was different from the other Jedi. He understood the importance of family and attachment in a way others didn't. By dying, Qui-Gon left Anakin in the hands of the Jedi Order without that special understanding. He left behind a promise. With his last breath, Qui-Gon asked Obi-Wan to train the boy. Obi-Wan kept that promise, but Obi-Wan became more like an older brother to Anakin, not a father, and that was a crucial failing for Anakin's upbringing. A brotherly mentor simply wasn't the same as the wise parental guidance Qui-Gon could have provided. This outcome of the duel essentially decided how Anakin would be raised, and it left him more vulnerable to negative influences. This moment ties all the way to Return of the Jedi. Palpatine was ready to use Anakin once Qui-Gon was gone. The Sith had effectively won the Duel of the Fates by removing the one Jedi who could have shielded Anakin from darkness. Palpatine's strategy was always to exploit Anakin's vulnerabilities. With no father figure around, Palpatine stepped into that role with ease. It's chilling to realize that Palpatine's claim over Anakin's soul in Revenge of the Sith echoes in Return of the Jedi when he tries to claim Luke's soul too, saying, "You, like your father, are now mine." The difference, Luke had a father, in Anakin, who ultimately returned and saved him, whereas Anakin had no Qui-Gon by his side years earlier. The duel in Theed Palace decided the fate of the galaxy by deciding who would guide Anakin. In the aftermath of Qui-Gon's death, Obi-Wan Kenobi did the honorable thing and took Anakin as his Padawan learner. Obi-Wan was a young man himself, as he'd just been knighted as a Jedi Knight because of his victory over Darth Maul. He cared about Anakin and truly tried his best. However, Obi-Wan was thrust into the role of teacher out of obligation and loyalty rather than by choice. He promised his dying master he would train the boy, so he did. This is a tough position for anyone. Obi-Wan went from being a Padawan one day to suddenly having his own Padawan the next. It's as if a student instantly became a teacher overnight. He was literally learning on the job of mentorship, and now his student was no ordinary kid, but the supposed chosen one. Even Obi-Wan didn't have the Council's full confidence at first. They allowed Anakin's training, but remember, Yoda and others still had their reservations. All things considered, Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship evolved to be more like an older brother and younger brother. Obi-Wan was only around 15 years older than Anakin and still quite a young adult when he became a mentor. Over time, their bond was warm, but also fraught, and the kind of friction you might see between siblings or close friends. Anakin respected Obi-Wan immensely, but often felt misunderstood or held back by him. For example, in Attack of the Clones, Anakin says Obi-Wan is as wise as Master Yoda and as powerful as Master Windu, and calls him a great mentor. Yet in the same breath, he complains that Obi-Wan doesn't appreciate his abilities and is holding him back. This tension hints at a lack of the kind of unconditional understanding a parental figure might offer. Obi-Wan upheld the strict Jedi rules with Anakin, chiding him for impatience or chastising displays of emotion, just as any Jedi Master would. But Anakin, who had come from a very emotionally charged childhood, with fear, love for his mother, and trauma, likely needed more than the standard Jedi discipline. He needed patience, empathy, and someone to help him work through feelings, not just tell him to suppress them. Obi-Wan, wonderful as he was, struggled to fill that role fully. It's very telling that in Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan's own spirit admits to Luke, "I thought I could instruct him as well as Yoda. I was wrong." Obi-Wan carries a lot of guilt about Anakin's fall. He knows that despite his intentions, he wasn't the ideal mentor for Anakin, where Qui-Gon might have been the compassionate father figure Anakin needed. Obi-Wan ended up being more of a strict older brother, and while Obi-Wan certainly loved Anakin like family, he never actually expressed that love openly until it was too late. In their fateful confrontation on Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan tearfully cries out, "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." This may have been the first time Anakin ever heard an adult male say "I love you" to him in his life. By that point, Anakin had already fallen to the dark side, and his heart was too black to accept that love. It's a tragic detail. Had Qui-Gon lived, Anakin might have grown up hearing those supportive words and knowing that feeling much earlier, possibly preventing the loneliness and resentment that festered in him. After Qui-Gon's death, Anakin entered the Jedi Order essentially as an outsider who was begrudgingly let in. The Jedi Council meant well, but they didn't make Anakin feel particularly welcome. Remember, Anakin was just a child who had left his mother and home behind, yet in the council chamber, what was the first thing he was told by Yoda? That he sensed fear in Anakin, and fear is the path to the dark side. This was technically true, but not exactly the warm, understanding guidance a frightened kid needed. Calling out Anakin for being afraid without helping him process that fear likely made him feel more alone. It sent the message that his natural emotions were wrong. The Jedi of that era had a very rigid attitude. They expected emotional detachment and taught their trainees to let go of fear and attachments in an almost cold turkey way. For a boy like Anakin, who already had strong attachments to his mom and then to Padme as he grew older, this approach was problematic. Instead of helping Anakin channel or understand his feelings, the Jedi basically told him to bury those feelings. Anakin learned to put on an outward show of obedience, but inside he was a storm of conflict, love, fear, anger, longing, with no healthy outlet. All these factors left Anakin rather isolated among the Jedi. He was the chosen one, which ironically made him feel different and alone. Other younglings in the temple had been raised from infancy to not know any other life. Anakin had a whole decade of life experiences, attachments, and habits that set him apart. During his training, Anakin struggled to fit in and felt like an outcast among his Jedi peers. He knew he was special, touted as the chosen one, and that made it hard to convince others and himself that he was just another ordinary Jedi student. Anakin also idealized Qui-Gon Jinn's memory and wanted to prove that Qui-Gon was right about him. Imagine the pressure on his shoulders. He wasn't just trying to be a good Padawan, he was trying to live up to a prophecy and to the faith Qui-Gon had in him. Yet the people around him, aside from Obi-Wan, weren't even sure he should have been trained at all. This is a recipe for an identity crisis. Anakin ended up feeling torn. He loved Obi-Wan and the Jedi, but he also felt they didn't truly understand him or trust him fully. In Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, we see the consequences of this. Anakin becomes more powerful and confident, but also more frustrated with the Council's cautious treatment of him. He's put on the Council, but not granted the rank of Master in Episode 3, which infamously infuriates him. Part of him is thinking, I'm fulfilling a prophecy. I'm the strongest Jedi of my generation, and yet they still don't respect me? This pride and resentment was brewing for years, and they stem in part from how things began after Qui-Gon's death. If Qui-Gon had been around, perhaps Anakin wouldn't have felt so estranged from the Jedi establishment. Qui-Gon might have acted as a mediator or mentor who could talk to the Council on Anakin's behalf, or at least help Anakin make sense of the Council's strictness. If there was one person who saw all these weaknesses and gaps in Anakin's life, it was Chancellor Palpatine. Palpatine was exceptionally cunning and had been watching Anakin from the very beginning. In fact, when Anakin is first introduced to Palpatine in The Phantom Menace, Palpatine tells him, "We will watch your career with great interest." He certainly did. Over the next decade, Palpatine slowly builds a friendship with Anakin, positioning himself as a trustworthy advisor and, yes, almost a father figure. He would praise Anakin, confide in him, and encourage his ambitions. Palpatine used his access to Anakin to undermine the young Jedi's faith in the Order. He would subtly plant the seeds of doubt, suggesting that the Jedi held Anakin back, and that he, Palpatine, recognized Anakin's true potential. This flattery was exactly what Anakin craved to hear, especially when he felt Obi-Wan and the Council were restraining him. Palpatine assured Anakin he was destined to become greater than all the Jedi, even Yoda. That's very seductive talk for someone with Anakin's mindset. Palpatine filled the void left by Qui-Gon by acting as a supportive mentor, but of course, it was all with dark intentions. We can speculate that if Qui-Gon had survived, Palpatine's job would have been much harder. Qui-Gon was known to be perceptive and less bound by all the Jedi Order's blind spots. He might have sensed something off about the kindly Chancellor's interest in Anakin, or at the very least, Qui-Gon could have given Anakin the guidance to resist those temptations. Instead, with Qui-Gon gone, Anakin increasingly turned to Palpatine for advice that often conflicted with Jedi teachings. By Revenge of the Sith, Anakin trusts Palpatine even to confess his worries about losing Padme. Palpatine masterfully exploits Anakin's greatest fear, the fear of losing loved ones, which, remember, began with losing Qui-Gon and then his mother, by dangling a promise of dark side power to save Padme from death. At that point, Palpatine has effectively become the mentor figure in Anakin's life, supplanting Obi-Wan's influence. That was Sidious's plan all along, and it succeeded because the groundwork had been laid by years of Anakin feeling misunderstood by the Jedi and longing for a fatherly guide. Palpatine was happy to play that part, only to twist Anakin into serving him. The outcome was Anakin's tragic transformation into Darth Vader, exactly what Palpatine wanted. It's important to connect the dots of how one tragedy led to another. Qui-Gon's death set off a chain reaction of events in Anakin's life that all compounded his journey toward the dark side. First, without Qui-Gon, Anakin had no one to help him truly cope with leaving his mother behind on Tatooine. The Jedi forbade attachment, so Anakin was basically told to forget about his mother and move on, advice that just isn't realistic for a compassionate 9-year-old. For 10 years, he secretly missed her and suffered nightmares of her in danger. When those nightmares became real and Anakin's mother died in his arms in Attack of the Clones, Anakin was completely shattered. He had no Qui-Gon to confide in or to help him control the ensuing rage. Obi-Wan wasn't around, Anakin was on his own in that moment, and even Yoda only sensed Anakin's path from afar. Anakin's massacre of the Tusken Raiders in vengeance was a direct result of his overwhelming emotion and lack of guidance in that critical moment. It's one of the first major steps toward the dark path, fueled by fear, anger, and grief. Now imagine if Qui-Gon had been there. Would he have allowed Anakin's mother to remain a slave on Tatooine for all those years? Perhaps not. Qui-Gon was a pragmatic and compassionate man. He might have found a way to free Shmi Skywalker, or at least ensure her well-being. And even if Shmi had still died tragically, Qui-Gon could have been there for Anakin afterwards, helping him grieve and reminding him of the Jedi way to find peace rather than vengeance. Sadly, in the real timeline, Anakin felt more alone than ever. After his mother's death, he even says, "I'm a Jedi. I know I'm better than this," showing he knows he violated what Obi-Wan and the Jedi taught him, but he couldn't help himself. This inner turmoil deepened Anakin's feelings of guilt and fear of losing Padme in the future, for example, because now he knew how painful loss could be. By the time of Revenge of the Sith, all these threads come together. Anakin feels isolated from Obi-Wan, who has been away fighting the war often, isolated from the Council, who he feels don't trust him, plagued by fear of losing Padme, and heavily influenced by Palpatine's promises. If we trace it back, Qui-Gon's absence is there at every turn. It created the initial void in Anakin's support system, which was never truly filled by the Jedi Order. Each subsequent tragedy then hit Anakin that much harder. He loses a parent figure, Qui-Gon, then loses his actual mother, Shmi, and he cannot bear the thought of losing his wife, Padme. With no fatherly mentor to guide him through these storms, Anakin makes desperate and ultimately terrible choices. Ironically, Anakin does fulfill the prophecy of the Chosen One in the end, but in the most tragic way possible. He brings balance to the Force only after falling to darkness and then being redeemed by the love of his son, Luke. One might say the Force eventually found a way to balance things, but it was a long, painful road that might have been very different had Qui-Gon lived. Some would even interpret Qui-Gon's death as the will of the Force, a necessary event to set Anakin on the path that would eventually destroy the Sith. Others feel that if Qui-Gon had survived, Anakin would likely not have fallen at all, sparing the galaxy a lot of suffering. While we can't know for sure how an alternate history would go, what we do know is that Qui-Gon's death had massive consequences in the story we got. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you.